Hey, thanks to all of you for coming. My name is Kristen Falkenstein. I'm the Senior Researcher in the Texas Schools Project. And today we'll be hearing from Karen Watt, who is Director of Avid Special Research Projects Office. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Avid program, it stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. And it is historically a high school reform effort that has historically targeted middle achieving kids and given them the supports they need to participate in rigorous coursework. Now they're broadening their scope and going them into middle and elementary schools and opening post-secondary to try to provide additional supports for kids who have been historically underserved by the system. Karen's been working with Avid since 2002, and she's at UT Pan Am. And before joining Avid, Karen was a teacher, assistant principal, and principal in South Texas. She received her PhD in educational leadership from UT Austin, and we look forward to hearing what she has to say on Avid. So please join me in welcoming.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. And Kristen said 2002. That's actually when we started publishing some research, but was working with Avid since 1999 with a comprehensive school reform grant in Edinburgh. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the comprehensive school reform research. And what I've done is lumped our research by topic through this presentation. So we'll have the early studies, comprehensive school reform, some Avid and Gear Up studies, some Avid graduates, some studies we've done on graduates of Avid programs, and then teacher leadership, and then some upcoming projects. I would like to ask if, Kristen, maybe one of you can be the timekeeper. If I have about 15 minutes left, can you let me know? And that way I'll see where I am in case I do want to entertain questions as we go along, because hopefully there will be some thoughtful questions as I go through the presentation. Okay, as I said, I am going to lump the research together. I'm going to talk a little bit about the early research from the 2002, some recent Avid research we have done in the last few years, some current projects that we're working on that are not published just yet, and then the upcoming projects that we have started on or are going to start on in the next couple of years. So that's how it's all laid out. And you do have the PowerPoint. You do have also a supplemental handout that has most of our studies, almost all of our studies on here, the published ones and the ones that are not published yet with the main findings. And so you can refer to that if you need to. All right, so I'll start with the early studies on Avid in Texas. And I didn't wake up one day and say, I think I'll start doing research on Avid. But it was because of my involvement in Avid and because with the Edinburgh School District, it's how it all began, and because I was able to go visit sites that were implementing Avid, and I thought this would be a great research project. These 7 school districts in Texas that implemented Avid as a comprehensive school reform, and they were all different. Rural, they were suburban, they were urban, they were in all different parts of the state. So our first study was, when comprehensive school reform was the big buzzword in the early 2000s, and it still is, I guess. But we published this study, and all it was a qualitative study looking at, and some descriptive student performance data, but looking at how the schools implemented over a 2-year period Avid and what Avid implementation did to change the structure of teaching and learning on that campus. And I'll show you a few findings. From that study, there were 26 schools, middle schools and high schools. We took the high schools only and decided to look at the accountability ratings, the accountability measures, the performance on the, at the time it was the TOS, the performance on advanced placement, SAT, ACT, and those kind of things. And also attendance and course taking. So we looked at 10 high schools. Unfortunately, one of the districts dropped Avid, so we were left with the 10 high schools. And the second one, I'll show you some of the results from this implications of the comprehensive school reform for secondary school students, underrepresented in higher ed. And what we were looking at was just those 10 schools. We decided to then take the next step and look at demographically similar schools. So we had 10 Avid schools that had been implementing Avid for 4 years, and 10 demographically similar schools in the same geographic region where we found these 10 schools. And we did some comparisons on the accountability ratings, on the college preparatory measures, and that was our 2006 publication. There was a spin-off study we did because we just didn't have enough to do. So we did the leadership study, and we looked at one district and the schools that were implementing in that district, and we looked at how the leadership affected the school reform, and that being Avid. All right, so that's the first lump. Some of the findings from these studies. Remember, the first one was all about the 26 schools, and it was all about descriptive kind of data. We did focus groups, we did observations, we went in and collected student performance data. And what we found was, we looked at the Avid students versus all the other students in the school, and we found that they outperformed consistently in all 26 of those schools. That was over a 2-year period. And then if you read the article, it talks about the Avid effect, and Hugh Meehan had a book, Constructing School Success, on Avid and its effect on the culture and climate of the school. And so we did observe that consistently over the schools in the attendance rate and advanced course taking. That means that not only did the Avid students improve their attendance and their course taking, advanced course taking, but we saw increases school-wide. And you'll kind of see that in the next 2 studies as well. We had improved accountability ratings that we saw. We had advanced placement test taking rates much higher at the Avid schools than the non-Avid matching schools. And if you want to access how did we match the schools demographically, you can find that in the article, and that is on our website. I'll show you. And then high school graduation completion rates also increased, and they actually fell at the non-Avid high schools over that 4-year period. And then this last bullet relates to the leadership study that I said was kind of a spin-off. There's a process that Avid schools go through, and it's a certification process. And every year, the school has to be certified by Avid Center. And so there's a document that has all 11 essentials of the program, and there are ratings for that, 0 through 3. Did they have tutors in place? And there's a scale. No tutors, 0, of course. 1 would be, yes, they have tutors in place, but maybe they're not trained. Those kind of things. So we took the certification documents and looked at how they were related to the actions of the principals on those campuses. In other words, their certification status is not just you're certified, but there are levels. There's demonstration. There's also, you might be a level 1 all the way through, or you might be a level 2, or you might be a level 3. And so we found that the principals, when they attended Summer Institute and they actually attended the site team meetings, their certification status at that campus was much higher than the campuses where that didn't happen. And those were just a couple of examples. All right, so that's a nutshell, a big, giant nutshell on our comprehensive school reform Avid studies. And so I'm going to move into more recent studies. And those are a couple of studies we've done with cohorts of Avid students and Gear Up students. And these are very interesting to me because you have 2 programs, Avid, which is all about college preparation, and you have Gear Up, which is also about college preparation awareness. And so because our university has a very, very large, the largest Gear Up grant in the nation, most of our schools in the Valley have Gear Up. and now most of our schools in the Valley have Avid. But at the time, we wanted to look at some college preparation measures with cohorts of students and a control group. So let me tell you what we did. First of all, this was published in '07, which means this cohort of students was selected, I believe, in '04. We selected a cohort of Avid students, a cohort of Gear Up students, a cohort of students who had both programs, Avid and Gear Up, and then a control cohort. Yes?
Karen, I don't know about Europe. Can you just, what is,
Okay.
could you just distinguish the two?
Yeah, Avid, of course, has an elective class and a trained site team, right, in the middle school and high school. Are you familiar with Avid?
Only because I've got high school kids and I know.
Yeah, I wouldn't assume that everyone knows.
Okay, and I didn't want to give a big introduction on Avid because I'm doing the research piece, but Avid is, it has 11 essentials, and I can't go into all of them, but there's an elective class that's a sport and social and academic support elective. Students are chosen. There's professional development. There's a team that's trained, and they go in and implement the program. There are trained tutors that go into the classroom and tutor the students. The point is to get them in more rigorous courses, right? Prepare them for college. Gear Up is a very large funding source that helps support many of our Avid programs financially. But it also has parental component, scholarship component, many other components, field trips. I mean, Avid, they take field trips. A lot of different components that are just for an entire cohort, an entire grade level of students to prepare them for post-secondary. Avid prepares students for four-year college, and Gear Up is about preparing every student for post-secondary, whether it's college or technical school or two-year college, you know. So the difference really is in that elective class and the professional development and the targeting of specific students that are selected, and then that program goes school-wide eventually, okay? So think of Avid as something that can be funded by Gear Up, but Gear Up does not get into the nuts and bolts of preparing these students for four-year college.
Does that mean a student can actually be in both?
Yes.
And so you can try to control for that.
Yeah, I mean,
I would say all the schools in the Valley that have Gear Up, which is, I think all of them now, most of them have Avid. And many of them are paying for Avid with Gear Up funds, okay? So good question. So we have four groups, right? And in 10th grade, we decided to, when they were in 10th grade, we decided to administer an anticipations and aspirations survey. And those questions were taken from Clifford Edelman's Answers in the Toolbox survey he did. And so those questions were, do you want to go to college? How much college will you be satisfied with? Do you think you will graduate from college? What are you going to do after high school? Work, go to college, both? So there are a series of questions, and we wanted to find out, because we know the aspirations in Hispanic students usually are high in 7th grade, and then they are lowered by the time they're sophomores, and even lower juniors and seniors. That's what the research has told us. So we wanted to go in and see, well, what might there be something Avid and Gear Up are doing that might help maintain those aspirations or raise those aspirations? So we did that in 10th grade, and then we followed up in 12th grade. And this is actually Dr. Lozano's dissertation. The same cohorts were given that survey, the aspirations and expectations anticipation survey again. So what did we find? 10th graders, we found that the Avid group had the highest educational aspirations as 10th graders. That means that they answered one question, do you want to go to college, yes or no? And so when we looked at the groups, this group had the highest as far as aspirations. They also had the highest educational expectations and anticipations. Those are more specific questions about, yes, you want to go to college, but how are you going to get there? Are you really going to be disappointed if you don't graduate? Will you be satisfied with something lower than a bachelor's degree? Those kind of questions. We also noticed that at the end of the 12th grade year, the Avid group took more higher level math classes. However, the Gear Up group took the most AP classes, and then followed by the Avid group. And then we looked at, of course, statistically significant differences in aspirations, anticipations, and college preparatory measures. And what we found was there were no differences from 10th grade to 12th grade in college aspirations. However, when we talk about the anticipations, some more specific questions, we found that the Avid/Gear Up group raised their educational anticipations from 10th grade to 12th grade. Yes?
Can you speak a little bit about your analytic methodology and how you think these findings inform the notion of impact, right, and causality?
Well, what we did in the 10th grade, we didn't have Edelman's scale to use were the aspirations raised or lowered. So the only thing we did in 10th grade was look at where are they now, okay, and were there statistically significant differences between the groups, okay, in the Avid group, the Gear Up group, the Avid Gear Up group, and the control group. Mind you, they're very small because we only had 140 total, which means we had about 40. The only group that was smaller than 40 was the Avid Gear Up group because that was the entire population of 10th graders that had Avid and Gear Up. It was 22.
So then you just did, like t-tests of whether the means were different?
Right. That's what we did in 10th grade. Now, in 12th grade, we looked at not only were there differences between them again, or were there differences between them, but was there a difference in where they were in 10th grade and where they were in 12th grade? So two different things. We found it was difficult. We lost some students also in 12th grade. So it was difficult to say. I mean, if you read our findings, you'll find that caution, our groups were smaller in 12th grade. So, one of the things that we could actually inform about was there were no significant differences. So you've got, I guess, how do I want to say it? I want to be cautious with our findings because these were just small groups of students at these two particular high schools. Okay. But how do they inform? Your question was how they inform. We looked at, if you look at this bullet right here, we did a transcript analysis of 140 students, okay, in addition to the survey. And so we looked at their transcripts, at their college preparatory measures, and we wanted to see how many of them took AP, a course for college credit, advanced placement, test taking, a higher level mathematics, okay? And so in looking at that, since our groups were so small, we just looked at percentages on the transcript analysis, okay? All right. And then on the aspirations questions, we just ran regression for each of the particular answers to those questions. Okay, there was a, I wish I could show you the survey, but I can provide it for you. And then we came up with some findings that most informative, I guess, would be that the anticipations were raised for that one particular group.
Which the dependent variable in the regression was what? Just the answer? 0 to 5 or whatever, or 0 to 3?
Right, actually it's 1 to 4.
Okay, so you just had their answer and then you just ran that on?
Right, across the groups. Yeah, so you had 4 groups and then here are the answers to the question. There is a scale that Edelman put together, but since we didn't have the large groups, again, we decided not to use his scale. And so, yes.
Looking at the transcript analysis, did you focus on which AP classes they were taking, or was it just the presence of an AP class?
It was the presence of an AP class or multiple AP classes. Okay, so did they take an AP class? And then our descriptive was 2 or more, 3 or more. And that's how we looked at, Gear Up taking the most AP classes. We don't know why that happened, but.
And can you talk just a little bit about the demographics of the groups? I mean, I know you said there were 4 groups, but are these?
Yeah, I believe out of the 140, there was only one non-Hispanic student. We found out after we selected the control group that we did not look at economic background when we did the matching control group. And we found that out only after we had already administered the survey and done the focus groups, because we did that in 10th grade. And so one of our implications was our control group actually had higher socioeconomic levels. Some of their parents went to college. But what we found was that even in that case, we had higher anticipations, aspirations, and college preparation for the other 2 groups, the Avid and Gear Up group. So it was interesting. I mean, even though ethnically they were very much the same, the socioeconomic status was very different.
Did you look at language status as well?
Yeah, that was one of the questions on the survey, but we didn't use it in the analysis. We asked them what was their primary language they spoke at home, their primary language they spoke with their peers, and their primary language they spoke at school. And so that's part of the descriptive analysis you'll see in the paper, but yes.
So how were students selected for the programs? They self-select, no?
Well, they're not selected for Gear Up. It covers a whole cohort starting in 7th grade. So they're all affected, the whole 7th grade class. And then by the time they get to be 10th grade, they've gone through already 3 years of that. Avid, yes, they're selected based on certain criteria. And the control group, we tried to match ethnically as well as looking at their 8th grade scores and course enrollment. Okay, here's a female that didn't take algebra and she was into it. So we looked at their transcripts and tried to match. The one thing we found out we didn't match was their economic level.
Right, but then the kids have to decide to participate, right? They're not, right? So, I mean, it's
Voluntary participation.
It's not terribly surprising then that their aspirations are different than the non-Avid participants because, right, those non-Avid participants might have been people who were approached and declined, yes?
Could be. Yeah, we don't know that.
Right. I'm just curious, I'm just really, trying to get a sense of what you make of these findings, how far can you really go with that?
Well, we wanted to go one step further,
Yeah.
but we didn't. And that was when they were sophomores in college, because that's also what Edelman did. He went 10th grade, 12th grade, and their 2nd year in college. But we could only find, out of the 140, we could only find 50 of them. And so we decided we weren't going to, they weren't all evenly across the groups. And so we might have had 10 control group kids and 5 Gear Up kids or whatever. So we did not do that last, because we wanted to see also their aspirations and anticipations, any change once they got into college. Okay. And some of them, we don't know where they went. We know who enrolled in at UTPA, and we know who enrolled in South Texas College, which were the local universities. So, all right, so we have the Gear Up studies. Thanks for the questions. This is my most favorite topic, and those are the graduates. All right, we've done some studies on Avid graduates, small cohorts, and each time we do a study, the cohort is larger, and I'll talk about that. Dr. Mendiola did her dissertation on a cohort of 50 students who were graduates of Avid programs who were attending UTPA. Well, I'll talk about that. This is identifying predictors of college success through an examination of Avid graduates' college preparatory achievements. And this was a cohort of 2007 graduates also attending UT Pan American, and there were a little over 50 in this cohort. This next one is a 2008 cohort of graduates attending 6 different institutions in the state of Texas. So we had 3 four-year universities and 3 community college that we looked at, and so I'll give you some of that information. All right, starting with the Dr. Mendiola dissertation. Hers was strictly qualitative with the exception of looking at students who were on track to graduate in 6 years or less, all right? And so what she did was focus groups with the students, but probably the most interesting finding, even though it was a small cohort of students, was that 79% of them were on track to graduate in 6 years or less. And at our university at the time, that number was less than 30 students who are on track to graduate in 6 years or less, or graduation rates. And nationally, it's up around 60% graduation rates in 6 years. And so she developed a transcript analysis that would show course credit accrual that would be kind of a model or a matrix for was the student on track to graduate in 6 years or less. So if you have 120 credit hours, then by the first year, you need so many, the second year, the third year, the fourth, all the way to 6. Okay. That paper is currently being reviewed to be published. Okay, when we look at our 2007 study, this will be interesting for you folks, your higher ed folks. Meeting the higher ed readiness component of the TAKS test and earning college credit while in high school were the strongest predictors of how we define college success in the 2007 study. Let me talk a minute about what college success is. We looked at Mendiola's definition, which was, are they on track to graduate in 6 years or less? But we also looked at Conley's and Pearson's definition. And that was, that there were 3 things. Did they enroll in remediation? Okay, if they didn't have to enroll in remediation, they had a 2.0 or better in their first semester, and then they returned to school after their first semester, so spring to fall. And by the way, all of these kids had to enroll in the fall immediately after their high school graduation. So when we looked at college success, there was a very small number that actually met that definition because most of the kids had to take remediation when they entered. And so we thought, oh, you know, let's go back to the drawing board. But despite having taken those remedial courses, even though they took them their first year and sometimes in the second year, a large percentage of them were still on track to graduate in 6 years or less. It wasn't the 79%, but it was about 68%. So the kids who had to take remediation, they might not have met Conley's definition of college success, but they were on track. If they met the HERC and earned college credit while in high school, of course, they were more likely not to need remediation in college. Okay, so we found that. All right, for the 2008 graduates, we added a little bit. First of all, students who took course for college credit, I just mentioned that. We found the same in the 08 grads. They're more likely not to need remediation, and they're more likely to be on track to graduate from college in 6 years or less. And then in the 08 graduates, we found that HERC mastery, as well as earning college credit in high school and completing 4 years of math in high school, we added this one now for this cohort, were predictors of that definition of college success. What we didn't find in our 07 grads, which was surprising, sort of, was that kids who took Well, this was not a predictor. Completing 4 years of math or a higher level math class and taking AP was not a predictor of college success, which was very surprising. Again, small cohorts, and our 2009 cohort, we're currently starting the work on that one. And I'll mention it at the end, but our 2009 cohort involves 38 institutions across the nation and about 750 some graduates at those institutions. So, yes.
Karen, I probably missed this. Who was the comparison group for these cohorts of graduates, Avid grads?
No, there's no comparison group. Meaning we took all the Avid graduates, okay, that were in our little cohort.
And then you track them in college.
And right. In other words, we knew because when they're seniors, they fill out a senior data collection form. And on that data collection form, it says where they want to go to college, or where they think they're going to go. So what we do is we have a list, and we send it to the college or university and we ask for their transcripts. And so in this case, we had 3 regions of the state, and in those 3 regions, we had a community college and a university, a 4-year university, where most of these kids were. And so we got their high school transcript as well as their college transcript. So that's how we were able to look at the measures of the high school measures versus the college success predicting.
Go back to your previous slide. Could you go back to your previous slide, the first bullet on that, where you asked it must have been before that one. Right. On the first bullet on that, where I'm curious to know what specific parts of Avid these students saw as the effective support system while they were in college.
Okay.
Good question, because for Mandela's study and for our 2007 study, we did do focus groups, and we found that there were 2 main things, and one was that they still stayed in contact with the Avid teacher. As a matter of fact, when the focus groups were conducted, they were actually done at the school district. Kids were already in college, but they felt more comfortable to go back to the school district and actually be interviewed there. Still in contact with the teacher. They made peer groups at the university for studying. So the studying and the tutoring. They sought out resources that they said if they got to the campus and they hadn't had Avid, they wouldn't know to go find the advisement center. They wouldn't know to go find the tutoring center. They wouldn't know to go find the writing center. So the things that they said were based on relationships as well as resources. So the relationships they built with the teacher, the relationships they built with their Avid classmates, and the resources they were able to access once they're at the university were very important. Also, we asked them, of course, what do you still use? What did you learn in the Avid class that you still use in college? Many of them, and these are in our papers, use Cornell Notes. They continue to stay organized and use a planner. And then the collaborative tutorial, basically. So those are some of the things they didn't continue, like learning logs, things like that. Good question. We also had a survey that asked them to check off what strategies they were still using in college, and so we use that data as well. Okay, whoops. Here's where I am. Well, let me stop for a second. So far, we've talked about mostly students. We did talk about schools in comprehensive school reform, how Avid has affected schools in those particular districts. And then graduates. Are there any questions about student performance and Avid? Yes.
Just one thing, that last bullet, predictors of Avid student success. How would non-Avid students have those same factors as predicting student success. If they've mastered at the HERC level, that is, they're being college ready, earning college credits in high school, and 4 years of math, would that work for any student?
Yes. Yes. And I guess what we learned was that what we can give out there to the field is that we want to make sure the Avid students and other students are taking the 4th year of math, are earning college credit in high school. And I didn't put on here because it wasn't statistically significant, but it was almost significant, was the number of years a student spends in Avid. And so if the student spends 3 years or more in Avid, then there's also that almost significant.
Right, but you expect that though, because if they've got the motivation to stay in Avid 3 years, they've probably got what it takes to stick it out to college, no? So I'm just curious, what is really the takeaway from that?
From this study?
From these predictors where the, like the Avid in 3 years or more is kind of the easiest case to say, well, if they stuck it out in Avid, they're more likely to stick it out in college, and that regardless of what Avid is, it's just some observed characteristic of that student. They're obviously motivated or whatever that is invisible to the researcher. And those things are going to be true for all those other, earning college credit in high school, completing 4 years of math. Those are all things that are really influenced by these unobserved motivational and preparation and social support variables that we don't know about that also impact success in college. So I'm just not quite sure. I mean, all of this is like, yeah, right? I mean, so what have we really, have we learned that Avid is really contributing to this? Because it doesn't seem clear to me that we can make that case based on what we've got here.
Remember that the purpose of our study was to study a cohort of Avid graduates. Okay, now what I didn't put on here, because this study is the community college versus the 4-year college. We also looked at differences between those groups. And surprisingly, there weren't that many differences except for students attending community college were less likely to have earned college credit actually in high school.
Sure.
So that's our, pardon me?
Which you'd expect, right?
Yeah, but we also looked at were there differences like in the completing 4 years of math, completing AP, HERC mastery, and there weren't significant differences between the two groups. Okay. Again, small numbers, but we are finding that students are choosing for economic reasons and close to home. They're going to the community college, many of the Avid students, the graduates. So I think it's important to look at this and say, all right, so if I'm an Avid teacher, director, principal, or what have you, yes, the student's in Avid for 3 years or 4 years, and that's great, but are they earning college credit? Are they mastering HERC on the tax? Are they taking that 4th year of math, which would then help predict that they're going to continue and persist in college, rather than saying, well, they're already motivated, most likely they will, because we don't know that. So, so that's what we've taken away from this.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Good question. Okay, how am I doing? Oh, moving along. Okay, this other piece, we wanted to look at the professional development piece of Avid. And so we've got a few publications from, for example, the 2007 Summer Institute Training. We disseminated a survey and looked at the relationship between the professional development and teacher leadership attributes of the Avid elective teacher. We also used the 2008 survey to actually do 3 studies. This one, identifying attributes of teacher leaders within the Avid program. This was a survey of the principals. What we wanted to find out was, what do they think the attributes are in a teacher leader, and do they use those attributes when they select their Avid teacher? Then we looked at professional development also as a predictor of teacher leadership with the 2008 survey, and the impact of Avid professional development on teacher perceptions of culture and climate. So I'll go through those real quick because I know it's hard to go through all the pieces. What we found, first study, the more professional development an Avid teacher has, and by the way, this was over 3,000 teachers responded to this survey, significantly predicts changes in teacher leadership. We also asked about their certification level, and we found that higher certification levels is more favorable to improve culture and climate of the school. Teachers who did, this was interesting, teachers who had not attended Avid Summer Institute, meaning they were new last year, or in this case the year before, to Avid, they rated Avid's impact as significantly higher than those who had attended Summer Institute. We weren't expecting to find this. In other words, I'm a new teacher and I go to Summer Institute and I'm doing the culture and climate survey. Avid has an impact on my campus, you know, because, and we had the indicators we took from 4 different culture and climate surveys. All right, and so then after they had already been through Avid 1 year or 2 years, then their culture and climate ratings were lowered. However, after their 3rd year of attending Summer Institute, the culture and climate indicators were raised. If that makes sense. All right, so what we found, teachers exhibit significant gains in teacher leadership once they have attended their first Summer Institute, but then it plateaus after the 2nd. And then what we found in our next study was that after the 3rd one, then again, you see some gains. As well as in our 2nd study, not only did we look at Summer Institute, but we looked at did they attend PATH, did they attend regional director trainings, all of those things. And then we did find females exhibiting significantly greater levels of teacher leadership. Yes?
What kind of turnover is there among the Avid teachers? I mean, if you lost a lot of those who were disappointed after, say, their 2nd year.
Right.
Is there? Do you know what the turnover rate is?
I don't know what the turnover rate is, no. But what we did know from this survey was how many Summer Institutes they've attended and how long their campus has had Avid. So they might be a new teacher, but the campus has had Avid for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or whatever. And so what we found was the new teachers, regardless of experience or years that Avid was in their school, they anticipated higher levels of culture and climate. But yes, you'll find turnover, but the whole idea is to continuously train new teachers for the program. Good question. Oops. Okay, those were our teacher leaderships. I'm going to quickly go through. We did a senior study as well, and just in a quick nutshell, we had 4 schools in California, 4 schools in Texas, and we looked at 2 schools in each state that retained their kids in Avid for 4 years, and those who weren't doing a good job at that. And we found, again, the personal bonds. We found the kids navigating beyond the scheduling, things like that. I'm not going to go into it because you can read that study. And I want to talk a little bit about our upcoming. We do have a study that we've submitted of Avid in post-secondary at a community college in Northern California. And this study will be published in the Community College Journal of Research and Practice. Again, it was qualitative. We didn't look at student achievement measures. We looked at how the team implemented and what the students felt about their experiences in Avid as a college student. Okay, all right. That's our 09 study that I mentioned, our continued leadership studies. I want to talk a little bit about school-wide and the AMI. One of the things that Avid tries to do is, remember I mentioned there's an elective class and it serves a certain group of students. Well, by serving that group of students, other teachers on the campus are trained and strategies are used not just in the Avid elective class, but in other classes. Eventually, the strategies that are used for the Avid students should be used for all. So we're going to do a study of, we started this, of Avid demonstration sites to see if Avid has really gone school-wide, and if it has gone school-wide and district-wide, what are some of the challenges, some of the successes, and some of the things that have to be in place for that to happen. Okay, we're looking at leadership, we're looking at instruction, we're looking at several other areas in these particular schools. The AMI initiative is African American Male Initiative. 6 schools in the nation got funded to recruit and retain more African American males in Avid. So we're looking at these 6 schools to see, first of all, the achievement of the students, and are they retained, are they staying in Avid for 4 years of high school. How the culture of the school is changing, if it is indeed changing. Some barriers, challenges, and successes in that particular project. We also have a study of middle school algebra using Avid students, looking at algebra as a predictor for high school and eventually college success. And whoops, I guess I missed one. We had a study of, gender. Oops, back at the beginning. We have a study of gender where we're looking at why is it that 70% of the Avid graduates are female and 30% are male. And so those are some of our upcoming projects. I have time for questions. I hope you do. I'm going to go to the end because I want to give you this website. Okay. If you look at this website right here, you will find all of the publications that you see on the handout. You won't see the unpublished papers yet, but if you email me, I can share some of that information with you. It's a lot of information to present, but I wanted to go through the categories and the steps through which we took to take on these studies and the phases of the studies. Any questions?
Oh, yeah, so we should go ahead and introduce some of the Avid folks. So Karen, you want to do the honors?
Okay.
Hope I get it all right. Well, I know Eileen Frio. By the way, it's her birthday today. Shh. Eileen is the director of post-secondary Avid. Did I get that right? Okay. Liz Morse is the director of Marketing and Communications for Avid Center. Thank you. Ben Solomon is program manager for the state of Texas Avid State Office. Correct? Yeah. And a former elective teacher, yeah. Yeah. So they have other insights and can answer Avid specific questions if you have them.